Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first ever Dual Historians episode here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And joining me today are two incredible individuals who have come together to create an amazing podcast. And here's a little bit about their podcast. History, as we know it, is often incomplete. It's a tale dominated by male figures, a narrative that overlooks the extraordinary women who have shaped our world. Enter a brand new podcast, She Changed History. Every Tuesday, my guests dive deep into the annals of history, unearthing the stories of incredible women who have been forgotten. From daring pirates to prolific inventors, they are uncovering the truth behind their remarkable journeys. Think you know history? Well, think again. Join them on She Changed History as they celebrate the unsung heroines who dare to challenge the status quo with the history you wished you learned in school. Tune in every Tuesday for She Changed History. And to tell us all about that, here are the two amazing people behind the podcast. Everyone, let's give a huge round of applause to our guests, Vicky and Simon. And guys, welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having us. That's a hell of an intro. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm so excited to have you guys on the show. I recently discovered your guys' podcast on Instagram. And honestly, I absolutely love it. I find it so incredible, the work you guys are doing. So just as a little added teaser, what can you tell us about She Changed History for those who are just learning about this right now?
Sure. It's just two people having a chat, I think, really. We try and go for that down the pub kind of vibe of, oh my God, you've never heard what? And then we kind of tell each other some crazy story of a lady who lived hundreds of years ago and has probably affected your lives today and that you didn't know existed at all. And each week we tell each other one story. And it's quite mind-blowing, isn't it? So it's quite you learn a lot. So yeah, I wouldn't... We're not academics or anything like that. We're just people who genuinely love history and genuinely love talking about people who, because we all know Winston Churchill. We're British, by the way. Winston Churchill, all the George Washington. We know like big figures in history, but there's so many people that we don't know about, and that's what we're aiming to talk about and discover a bit more.
Yeah, and we definitely try and do it in the friendly chat. You've got to hear this cool thing I've heard about kind of way, rather than it's more that than a lecture. I think we are just both intrigued by these stories that have somehow been missed out from sort of the common narrative of history. And yeah, the disparity between how well known the man who did something to the woman who did something very similar. And yet one of them has Schindler's List made about them. Not to disparage Schindler, great guy. But on the flip side, you've got Irina Sendler, who saved more but did it in such a low-key way. And her story just went unheard of for so long. And yeah, we just think they're like cool stories that more people should know about. We're excited to put them out there.
And honestly, I 100% agree. And after this interview, I'm going to get you in contact with some of my friends in the UK as well as here in the States, because they would absolutely love to be on your guys' show to maybe do like a special episode, as well as probably bring to attention some other famous heroines that maybe you guys have not touched on or maybe did not know about. But before we dive into the podcast side, let's actually talk a little bit more about you guys personally. So, Vicky, Simon, how did sort of this passion for history come about for you guys? And also, how did you guys meet to sort of create She Changed History?
Sure. Well, me and Simon go to choir together. So every Monday we go to a little local choir in our hometown, and we sing for a couple of hours, and we met through that. And after choir, we always go to the pub And we were doing this in the pub. We were talking about, did you know this and did you know that? And then we just thought it'd be a good idea. It's an idea I've had floating around for a while, and I never knew how it was going to really materialize. But then to bounce off someone else just made me feel a little bit, I felt heard, which is something I hadn't felt before because I thought I was alone in this geekery. And then actually it's quite fun, and we quite like researching it, and we quite like editing it and sharing it, and so it's kind of grown a little bit, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I can still remember the first time in the pub when you showed me, because you had a blog beforehand, where you sort of wrote about these stories and similar ones, and you showed me the blog, and it's just fascinating. You told me the story of the witches in their slightly old school fighter planes, and I just loved the idea of it. And at the time I was going through I'd read a couple of books recently, like Period by Emma Barnett, and I was getting quite irate about various things like endometriosis and the just like women, specifically women medical science not being up to where it is with men. So I was on a bit of a pedestal with this, and then Vicky shows me this blog, and it's like, right, this is perfect. Let's do something. That's like, and any sort of geekery then like that, I'm well up for getting involved with. I take very little credit for the podcast. I just turn up and jabber once a week. This is Vicky's idea, and I'm really honoured to be part of it. It's brilliant.
Awesome. That's really, really cool. And honestly, I don't know what it is, but okay, maybe it's okay. How am I going to word this right so I don't offend my
we can take it.
followers? But a few of my historian colleagues from the UK, they've always said the same thing. They either go to a pub and just discuss history, or they just meet up with family and friends and also discuss history at the pub. I don't know what it is. Like, even here in the States, like a bar, we would never consider a place to discuss history. We'd just be like a place to just chat. But that's incredible. Like, honestly, I would absolutely love to just go to a pub in the UK and just chat about history nonstop. That sounds like
we're going after this. We're going to be in the pub after this, so you can come with us there.
Legitimately going to the pub. Yeah, it's a very different vibe in British pubs to American sports bars. It's a different pace. That's where all the best ideas and conversation happens.
Oh my gosh, that is incredible. And also on the topic of ideas and great ideas. So, Vicky, what would you say when talking with Simon and telling that, hey, I got this, this podcast, I really want you to be a part of it because, we work really well together. What would you guys consider to be the definitive aha moment for you guys when you realize we can take our passion for history and create a platform to bring awareness in the field of history, specifically women in history that have been overlooked and forgotten?
Yeah, there's loads of moments that have just come to mind, but one of the things that stood out for me is when so we stick everything on YouTube because everyone sticks everything on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And one of the stats I pulled off within our first month was 84% of our listeners were male. And that's when I was like, people are going to learn something brand new. You know what I mean? I wasn't, in my head, that wasn't our target market at all. But the fact that 84% of the viewers that we had on YouTube are men, I was like, come on, this is pretty exciting. We're actually making waves here. So that's quite nice.
That's incredible. That's amazing. And from that point, let's actually now talk about the very first episode of She Changed History. So when you guys sat together discussing ideas of possible episodes, walk us through of that first episode. And this is a two-part question. The goals you had with that episode, as well as being, the definitive moment of the channel, being this is what's going to be our foot in the door to show people who we are and what we're going to be talking about, but also your promise to your future listeners who are going to be listening to this episode and future episodes down the road.
I take that, so it's quite a big one.
That is a solid question. Well, this, I mean, our first episode that's actually released on the feed was Qingqi, I think, the Pirate Queen, which
All right.
was sort of second or third that we recorded. First one that we recorded was Irina Sendler. I think we recorded that 3 times because we were technical newbies at this recording. Malarkey. I think we chose for Qingqi to be the first one just because it was such a badass story.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's absolutely insane, but I'm not endorsing pirate beheadings and just general sort of sea crime, but just felt that she was such an empowering, sort of strong individual who really brought together so many different skill sets. It was a fun story to tell and listen to, and I think it sort of promises that we're not going to shy away from characters who aren't necessarily all good. She had bad aspects to her. She did some terrible things, but there is an underlying, even though she may have sort of used her powers for not the greatest good, there are still things that we can take away from what she did and the way in which she went about doing it, that you can maybe apply to your own life in a slightly less brutal way. So
that's so interesting as well, isn't it? Sorry, that what you're saying that she did 300 years ago is that so relevant today, isn't it? And I think that's such a I didn't expect that when we first started.
And we find that has surprised us with a lot of the episodes. We have been quite heavy on Victorian women, but even going back to sort of the ancient Roman era and things, there are just these same characteristics that keep cropping up with these women. And maybe execution is the word in the case of Qingqi, but maybe the execution of it isn't too palatable, but these characteristics and abilities that they bring together, and that sort of gung-ho, of course I can do this attitude. And so we want to bring that forth and actually find like the lesson in these women's lives and the inspiration from these women's lives, even if the end result isn't necessarily what we encourage you to do. And so we're not going to shy away from sort of hiding particular aspects. If we think they're interesting, we think there's some sort of merit to what they've done, this is a story worth hearing, then we will bring it to you unvarnished.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably one of the most beautiful things about, content creation on history is showing history in its truest form. And I've always been a big advocate for this, that, history is muddled. No matter what aspect you look at it, it's going to be muddled. And sometimes history is uncomfortable. It is cruel. But to water down some aspects of history, whether it's cultural history, any type of history, it does a disservice, because how are we ever going to learn from our past mistakes if we don't teach it? Of course, with the context in mind, understanding, this is how they viewed themselves, and this is why it's wrong. Like, example, when people think of, dictatorship in the modern sense, of course, it's going to have a very negative connotation to it, and rightly so. But if you look at dictatorship from the classical period, specifically the Romans, dictatorship was kind of like 50-50 depending on who was in charge at the time. And for people who don't know what I'm referring to, in Rome, a person who became a dictator normally was supposed to relinquish power. That was literally the last line. If the Senate was like, we can't figure something out, we're going to give this person unlimited power over the state to do what needs to be done. And after which, there have been many times where famous dictators in Rome relinquished their power. They just went back to daily life. That, of course, changed when Julius Caesar took over and realized, I'm not giving up sole power. I'm now going to establish a monarchy. And from there, that's where the connotation of dictatorship switches from a somewhat positive to now very negative. But that's the thing about history. You have to tell it. And then
you really got a taste for it.
Yep.
Yeah. It's like, this is pretty cool. Yeah.
This is why I love doing these.
I think what surprised me most, because we've got all of these stories, and in isolation, the story is great, but of course no history happens in isolation. It is within the broader context of its time, and there are so many different offshoots. This is, I think, what makes it so difficult researching a particular topic or a particular person, because as soon as you learn anything, you have to put it in the context of when they grew up, when they were alive, the societal norms of the time, what other attitudes they would have coming in. I think a few of my first episodes happened to focus on Black women in sort of early 1900s to mid 1900s America and the attitudes that they had to fight through. And thinking of Irina Sendler, of course, you can't do someone who saved children from the concentration camps without going pretty heavily into sort of Nazis. And it just covers so many other topics. And of course, people aren't black and white, are they? It's always a grey area. And it's really interesting to see their motivations for doing these things, however much you may disagree with them or agree with them, but seeing what they've done within the context of how they grew up and those conditions that they experienced.
Absolutely. And also, when we talk about the history, it's always very interesting to hear, you know, other people's perspectives and like understanding history as well. So going from that, what was the general reaction from friends and family who learned that you guys were doing this? And did they listen to a few of your guys' early episodes?
My mum texted me today. I haven't told Si this. My mum texted me today that she listened to this week's episode, and she said, I've learned something completely new and completely different. And so they're really supportive. And Simon got married earlier, late last year, met his mum at the wedding, and the first thing she said to me, not even "Hi Vicky, how are you?" I haven't seen you for a while. It was, "Oh my god, I love your podcast." And she was having an emotional day anyway, wasn't she? It was quite an emotional day.
Yeah, she was.
But there was like tears.
Well, she
in
was
her eyes
meeting the host of She Changed History. It's
an
incredible day for her.
Tipped her over the edge.
It's been great. We sort of fielded it out to quite a few people. We've got a really nice supportive friendship group in Choir. Like for our trailer, one of our friends from there, Cara, American, she did the voiceover for the trailer for us. And the people there they've been really good in listening, downloading, liking, subscribing. But especially even Gary and some of the other male members of the choir who listen to it, it has surprised me. The YouTube statistics surprised me, but the male listeners have really got on board with it and really sort of taken an interest. And they're not too lengthy episodes, about half hour or so. So it's just a bite-sized little travel through a cool story, and you learn something about the broader context as well.
Absolutely, 100%. And from those early interactions to now, would you say that your guys' promise has been validated, that as you guys mentioned before, that you're going to present history that's unvarnished, maybe uncomfortable, but it's going to be true and accurate with the context in mind?
I think so. I think we also were invited by the Open University to do one of our episodes live at their university campus, which was amazing. And that really validated to me, because that was like on a different level, because obviously they're a university. These people have actual qualifications behind them and stuff like that. And they made us feel super welcoming. They gave us a proper little setup, and it was really validating, because we got feedback live. Like, as soon as we finished recording, people came and spoke to us and was like, one person was asking if they could let their son listen to it. He was 11 and she was a bit unsure because the themes were quite heavy, as we've been talking about. And I found that really like, oh yeah, we're doing something cool, and we're doing what we said we were going to do, and people are liking it. So that's quite exciting. Yeah,
it was great having that live feedback and that reaction from people at the end, and just seeing how enthused some of the people there were for, wow, this is amazing, never heard of this person before, what a great story, ... have you heard about? And so many people then coming forward with their suggestions of some cool story that they've picked up along the way. And that we're no expert in we're sort of learning as we go along with the podcast, and that's really part of the excitement for me in doing it, is that each week I really am learning something new. I'm not lecturing on existing knowledge. And these suggestions that people come along with, often from their particular culture or background, and there's someone stand out for them that's otherwise unknown more broadly. So yeah, having this feedback from them is really great.
Absolutely. And I always think that, it's very, very integral for at least for people starting off on, their first creative project is very, very integral, which leads to sort of the first reflective question, which brace yourselves because this one is one of few heavy hitters. So, as, creators, as, fellow historians, whenever we work on a fellow project, we put a lot of heart into it. We put a little bit of ourselves into it in the sense that we want to show people that we know what we are talking about. And especially now in the digital age, that is a double-edged sword because, yes, we are able to reach a wide audience of people of different backgrounds, from different beliefs, and teach them something that maybe they were unaware of or maybe broke some old myths about this character that this person believed for so long. And that's always a great thing. But on the other side of the coin, I have found that we do leave ourselves exposed to be, ridiculed, get hate speech, trolls, spam, and so forth. And especially in the field of history, I've covered a lot of my colleagues on this term of, armchair historians, where a lot of my colleagues have argued that, those who are labeled as armchair historians, not classically trained, are given the most critique and ridicule because they are not classically trained. They don't have, backing, and they're not taken very seriously. And that's very, unfortunate that is happening. And, that can lead to a lot of imposter syndrome and heightened anxiety, and maybe, unfortunately, make them reconsider, am I actually doing something that's making a difference, or am I going to suffer the abuse of people who are going to question, my integrity and presenting something that I'm very passionate about? So, Vicky and Simon, I'm just wondering, have you guys ever had those moments of anxiety or imposter syndrome? And if so, or if not, what has disciplined you guys to continue making episodes for your guys' podcast and not really worrying about what other people may think about your guys' show, or maybe you guys' personally, and just beyond that?
I love this question. Sorry, go on, Vicky. Yeah.
No, you can go if you want.
No, okay, you go first.
No, I was going to say that it used to really bother me. It used to bother me a lot. And then, again, Simon probably doesn't know this, but he said, and this was not around the podcast, it was around choir, because we're trying to grow our choir and things like that. And he said one day, well, it's not going to be for everyone. Like, you can't please everyone. And I was like, huh. And then I've taken that wording and kind of applied it to every area of what I do now.
Yeah.
And I know, isn't that funny? Like, you actually taught me a life lesson.
It was totally accidental. Yeah.
And so yeah, we're not going to please everyone, and that's okay. But I think it doesn't change the fact that what we're doing is worthwhile. And in the great words of Taylor Swift, haters are going to hate, aren't they? So.
Yeah, I have had imposter syndrome in sort of various circumstances before, but I've just never felt any with this podcast at all, because I don't think I'm not claiming or professing to be an expert on these topics. I'm coming from it, and I hope it comes across, and I hope it makes it more accessible to people that we are not trained historians. I don't have a particular degree in a particular area that we're talking about. We're not necessarily going into the depth that you would get. Some of these women we speak about, you could write books and books on their lives and the intricacies and the context of the time. We're not going into that level of detail. We are presenting a 30 to 40 minute podcast as an overview of their story. It's like, you haven't heard anything about these people before. Here it is. If you want to go away and research it more, brilliant. If it turns out that I've got something wrong in my research, please correct me, because this is the whole point of this is to learn and to expose people to these new ideas, new people they've not come across before, maybe change their way of thinking on something. Maybe if it just gives one person that.
And we always cite our sources as well, don't we? We always say where we've been. So it's not like we're plucking it out of thin air.
And I would much rather be an armchair historian than no historian at all. And I think there's a market for the far more in-depth, the far more academic, and that's great, but I think that doesn't necessarily suit a lot of listeners. And what we're presenting is an accessible introduction to these topics that people are more than welcome. We're not in competition with the academic ones. This is an intro of check this story out. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And that's all we're promising. That's all we're offering. And hopefully we reach a few people who maybe otherwise would be too intimidated by this sort of more institutional academic historical approach.
Love that.
That is very well said, you guys. That is, very, very true. And I've kind of almost had to go through something similar myself in my own background, because when I graduated from university, I didn't want to go into the realm of academics to be like a teacher of history, even though I love teaching history to people, like sharing with friends and family. I knew that's not the direction I want to go, and I want to go the way of writing because I love to write. And I often found myself, wondering, am I going to be taken seriously in my writing of these people that I write about, or these battles that I write about? Because I put, just as you guys put a lot of research into your guys' episodes to show that, hey, we know what we're talking about. We're citing these sources. Same thing when I was writing my articles, which I'm still doing. And it was definitely a learning curve to really show that, I do know what I'm talking about. Does that mean I'm not going to be able to learn along the way? Absolutely. That's the thing about history. We are always going to be learning. We're always going to be growing, which kind of leads into a very fun question, which I've been asking a lot of my guests, which is, and this was mainly an author question, but I've tailor-made it to suit my other guests, because during the lockdown and the quarantine, those 4 years, a lot of people, of course, we were all isolated. We couldn't go out. We couldn't talk with anybody except for doing virtual discussions like this. But during those 4 years, a lot of people were able to make their own content creation, whether it's music, artistry, books. A lot of historians have come out during the quarantine years and build their brands. And I just find it very fascinating how a lot of people consider that to be the golden age of content creation, or the golden age of independent creators. So in your guys' opinion, would you argue that the 4 years were the birth of the golden age of independent creation? Or did that kind of, rush or just speed up the golden age that was already on the rise?
Ooh, I've got an opinion.
Go, Si. I need to plug my laptop in.
That's a way to avoid a question. Yeah. So it feels like it's a golden age that's been brewing for a long time. And I just feel like every month that goes by, we get deeper into it. And it's not necessarily because of COVID. COVID may have accelerated it slightly, but COVID may also have been a case of quantity over quality. And
right.
once COVID's over, it's actually the people who are doing the quality and have the sort of dedication to stick to it are still around. But I just think it's wonderful that it's so accessible to people now, and the technology continues to get cheaper and easier to use, and the platforms get more mature. That we are in a golden age. We have been for a few years, and for me, it just keeps getting shinier. And I love that. We're not up there in thousands of listeners, but I hope that some people get some pleasure from it, and the fact that we can basically sit at home, research something that we think is cool, and other people can access it. I think is just absolutely marvelous. If we do have a breakthrough and get to the sort of heady heights of top 10, then that'll be great. If we don't, then if it remains a project purely for our own pleasure, I love doing it, and I love that the facilities that we have allow us to focus on the actual content of it and not the how to make it.
Awesome. Vicky, do you have any thoughts on this question?
one thing I would say is when we first started, we said, because I went on a little podcast course, like how to do a podcast. And one of the facts we were given is something like 96% of podcasts don't get past episode 21. So
Okay.
for the past like 4 months, we've been like, just got to get to 21, just got to get to 21. And I think we're now on 24 or something like that. So I feel like we've really, and I think we've got better over time as well. I think we're much slicker, and I think our love for it has just grown. And we've managed to get Cara on board now, so she's, it's growing. So she's our third host that steps in if one of us can't make it, which means that we can keep doing it for longer. And yeah, I just feel very lucky. So it's a good feeling.
Mhm.
That's awesome. And I also have to agree as well. And many people who may not know this, or you're just watching now for the first time, but The Wandering Scribe was initially just an audio podcast. Like, no one saw my face, and that was solely on Anchor. And that was mainly just author interviews, because that was just a way to break the boredom during the quarantine those 4 years. And then over time, from season 1, got to season 2. For season 2, that was where like the historian really came about, like, interviewing fellow historians, fellow content creators in the field of history. And then season 3 came out, and from season 3 came the Wandering Quill YouTube channel, which now rebranded to the Wandering Scribe. And in the last 3 years of doing this on YouTube, I've had the privilege to have met so many incredible authors, so many incredible historians, and culminating in a total of 300, with this episode, 305 videos,
Wow.
which is, I never thought about doing this.
Congrats, that's amazing. Congratulations.
And now you're on Google.
Thank you. I never thought about this being like a career or making into a brand, but that's kind of the interesting thing about independent creators, that we take our passions and we make it into a brand and a business, which now leads into my favorite segment of the interview, which is the business side. So let's actually talk a little bit about the business aspect of She Changed History. So when you guys were initially developing the podcast, was it solely going to be about women's history, or were there a lot of ideas on the playing field of like, what can we talk about? And how much research did you guys go into, building the podcast? Because Vicky, I know you just mentioned that you were just on a podcast listening of, how to start, and that most podcasts don't go beyond 21 episodes or don't last until so many episodes. So how much research did you guys go into building She Changed History?
It's quite hard to say, because when, like Simon said, I had a blog originally, and when I did that blog, I did a lot of research. I did a lot for that, and the blog was almost like proof of concept that yes, I could do it. Yes, there's people out there. And then lots of things happened. We moved house, and it just kind of fell by the wayside. And then I feel like She Changed History has happened really organically. Like, we're not here being like, this is our business plan, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to grow. We know we want to level up. That's definitely something we want to do. And when we went to the university, we had T-shirts made, and people loved them, and I wasn't expecting that reaction. So I do think there's something in it. But in terms of, we know it's a niche market. We know that there's a lot of value to add into him, a lot of value to be added to it by doing what we do. So in terms of that, I think it's viable. But in terms of next stages and business type of things, there's ways of doing it, but we'll do it when we're good and ready. Like, we've been working so hard on creating such a, like, curating, if you like, a podcast with loads of people from different backgrounds, and growing it organically. But having said that, we have discussed, haven't we, about next level, which is doing things like this, like meeting you and having people on, and we're doing it just in our own little way, aren't we?
I am a firm believer in, you just do something that you love, and there will hopefully be other people out there who love it as well. And coming into this, I didn't say sort of yes. When Vicky asked me, I didn't say yes thinking, hey, up money bags, here we go, this is a business. I did it because I thought it sounded cool, and I thought there's stories that if I found interesting, other people are going to find interesting. I think there's real value to getting those stories out there. And you're talking about the golden age. Well, it really is, in terms of, yes, we're a niche, but it's a niche across the world. You can reach so many people who 10, 20 years ago you wouldn't. I think back to my brother, who used to make his own wrestling fanzines, and he had a mailing list, and he would go and photocopy and post them out to. We have none of that issue. We can just present, here's a thing that we love doing, I hope you enjoy it too. And certainly some people are enjoying it, and we're now getting to the stage where we've proved the concept, we enjoy making it, people who've heard it seem to enjoy listening to it, and there's definitely more that we can do. I'm thinking of it more from how to get more exposure for it, rather than necessarily a business and money making sort of aspect, but it would just be great to get it out there to larger platforms, to a larger voice, just so that more people can hear it who might be interested. And for those who aren't interested, that's great, you do you. But for the ones who might be interested, it would be brilliant to get more of a platform to get that out. So that's where I think a lot of our expansion and reaching out to other creators and collaborators, that'd be great to do.
We did say as well we'd love to go. So we have a history festival here, and we'd love to do a talk at that, at our local history festival. That would be Pete. We'd love to do that. We'd do a live episode there. So
that's amazing. And again, you brought up history festival, which of course my fellow historian and friend Jackson Van Uden, he's always mentioning about. England has these incredible history festivals, which I'm so jealous we don't have here in the States, because if there was a way to do that in the States, I would 100% go. And if I was able to get a plane ticket, I absolutely might. And until that happens, I would for sure go to the UK just to be a part of like the history festivals, especially the Chalk History Festival, which from what I've seen is like probably like among the many largest history festivals in the UK, which is just incredible. And just seeing so many incredible people passionate about history, just teaching things, even if it's just like, people who reenact, the daily life of people who lived in like a medieval town or even Victorian London, or just the simplest jobs. It's just so fascinating. And that, of course, leads into, understanding your audience, which is a hit or miss sometimes, which is a learning curve for all of us. And I'm very curious. So when you guys started this podcast, did you initially try to market to a broad audience, people who were also in the academic field, but also people who had a general interest of history? Or did you not consider an audience at a time, in the sense that we're going to market to this particular audience and just make episodes and just see, like, from the data who the audience was?
Definitely the latter. Like when we started, we just plastered it everywhere. We spread it as far as we could. I worked for a university, so we had a mix of academias at the university who I shared it with, and then, like Simon said, our choir friends, our family, local people, local Facebook groups, whatever. And it was very much just it was very broad. And I think as we're going on, like Simon said, with those stats and stuff, you surprise yourself, and that's something that we can now use that data to do something like the next promotion run we have or something. We can use that and be a bit more targeted.
Yeah. I think it's a nice format as well. Speaking earlier about sort of armchair historian thing and whether we're respected amongst more academic historians, but I think it's a lovely format and a lovely concept for sliding history into people's lives without them really knowing about it. It's like your mum chopping up courgette and putting it in your spag bowl so that you eat vegetables without knowing about it. Because the last time I did history was well over 20 years ago at school, and I didn't consider myself, I wouldn't have listed previously history as necessarily a specific interest, but then realizing science is my thing. Ada Lovelace, brilliant, love that story. I've known about her for a long time, but then it's just changed my thinking and thinking of it in the historical aspect, and realizing that actually all of these sort of other interests I have, it is it's all history, and it's a way of getting that to people who wouldn't necessarily say they are interested or think they're interested in listening to a history podcast, but they're just interesting topics about pirates and scientists and protesters, and we're able to sneak in that broader context with each of these stories.
That's actually very, very true. And honestly, that comes down to, the mentality and the mindset. Like, whenever we create projects, it's like, are we doing this because, we're passionate about it, we like to share this passion with others, or are we doing this with, like, the business mindset, trying to build something off of it and trying to create our digital identity? And I often find it very interesting, when talking with people in history, this question in particular, because it is a little bit more difficult as opposed to, let's say, if you were like an author or something, because as authors, you can market to a particular audience and you can just say and write whatever you want. But in the field of history, it's this delicate tightrope where you don't want to, boggle people with academic jargon that they're not going to be interested in, but you also don't want to dumb down and like consider your audience unintelligent, because you don't want to do that, because you're going to lose people. So it is this fine balance where you do want to, appease the general history enthusiasts, but also possibly get people who are, fellow students who are learning about something, or maybe want to look at history from a different perspective. And that, of course, comes down to, the listenership, or in some cases, readership. Now, this question, again, was initially an author question, which was about, readership, middle grade, YA, NA, and AF. But I definitely feel when it comes to the teaching of history, it is kind of like that similar, where you do have, middle grade history where you're teaching like younger audiences, YA's young adult, where you can talk about, certain topics, but still, be mindful of what you can and can't talk about. And new adult and adult fiction, that's a little bit more, okay, grown up, we can talk about certain topics, certain themes, certain events in history, and not be worried of what we're going to say, because, we are talking about something that is grown up. So with all that said, where would you guys consider Sea Change history on this listenership age category? And how much of a challenge is it to create episodes with this listener age ship in mind?
We don't really think about it, to be honest. We
Okay.
kind of, like I said earlier, we were like, this is us down the pub. So if you're likely to be down the pub, you're probably going to enjoy it. You know what I mean? That's probably the age group. There are some episodes that have really dark topics and dark themes. So obviously, and we do put some what's the word, like trigger warnings sometimes at the top, particularly if we're talking about domestic violence, for example, or sexual assault or something of that nature. So we always try and be as open up as possible. But when you upload something, I always click like not for kids, just to be safe, really.
Some of our episodes would be great for kids to listen to, but it should definitely be after the parent has filtered it, as this episode being. I mean, I seem to focus a bit more on STEM, so women in science, and I think younger people should listen to that and know that even 50, 100 years ago, there were these trailblazing women in science working on par alongside the men developing these things, and it is possible, and you should go for it. All of that. There are some other things which absolutely kids should not listen to. I prefer them to not know that is a part of the world. But just because maybe one part of our audience should avoid it, I still think it's a really important story to be told. I think people should listen to it, even if it's uncomfortable. The world is uncomfortable. The views that people have are uncomfortable. The people around you can be terrible. I think it's really important for these stories not to be avoided, you need to confront it sometimes. And then sometimes we do a happy story that the kids will love.
That's awesome. That's actually really incredible. And kind of on that topic, I've always found it very interesting of how people present, history, which comes to one of my favorite questions, which is, of course, this balance of individuality and, respecting, the stories of the past in terms of like how these stories have been presented. So how has it been that for you guys in terms of, showcasing your guys's identity and how you guys approach history and storytelling, but also being mindful to, of like certain people that you are talking about, being mindful or maybe making aware that this person has been talked about numerous times from these other people, and this is how they have shared history on this individual, but we are going to show a side that maybe you are not aware of.
Yeah, I do find sometimes that I find myself criticizing the articles that I'm reading. So I was researching one today, and I think sometimes there's this unconscious bias sometimes in historian that in the historical world that the female perspective wasn't always considered, which makes sense because we're in a patriarchal society, and you see that seep into sometimes the commentary, and there have been times on the episode where I'm like, oh, and they said this, but actually I disagree. I think we should look at it from this perspective. Like Empress Matilda was a classic one where historians over time have called her out for that she wasn't very collaborative, and she wasn't doing things for the greater good. They saw her as selfish, and that has been a constant thread through the research. And we spoke about that briefly, didn't we? That actually, if she was a man doing this, you probably wouldn't blink an eyelid. So we don't hide from that, do we? If we think something's sexist, we'll call it out within.
We'll call it out, yeah. And this difference in terminology for the same behaviour, but just between male and female. Whereas a woman would be hysterical, the man would be something else. Or Empress saying she's selfish or not cooperative. If an emperor had been doing that, it would have been strong and decisive and all that. So we do try to call this out in how it's been presented elsewhere
with a modern day context.
Yeah, and I think also like to focus. Certainly in the episodes I present, I like to focus on their skill set and attitude, possibly more so than the actual thing that they've achieved, but just what gave them the power to then go on and achieve that. So it's not necessarily a dry rundown of here are the dates and a series of events. It's what inspired her to believe she could do this. What were the circumstances that allowed her to do this? Where was the lucky break that got them noticed? What was the bit of work that they did that got them in front of the right people? What skills did they have in sort of this mixture of diplomacy and natural ability and circumstance and chance? And how did that come together for them? And how can we relate that to modern lives and use that as some sort of inspiration for you to achieve what you want to?
That's, very, very true. And this comes to like, a very favorite question, which I don't typically ask a lot of people, but I think it is very important, which is what I like to call the 3 E's. And I'm always interested to hear people's thoughts on this, which are to educate, entertain, and enlighten. And normally I've always asked, authors this question, but I definitely feel it also applies to the field of history as well as historical content creators, fellow historians, historical writers, and so forth, because I want to hear their interpretations of this and what it means to them. So, Vicky and Simon, for you, what do the 3 E's mean for I can't speak today. Sea change history. That was a tongue twister unnecessarily.
She changed.
Yeah, we do that quite. We do all those 3 things, and I think they're really important when we're building a story that we want to educate people, we want to entertain them, because we always pick stories that are like, with that oh my gosh moment. And we always find a really just like Simon was doing there's always a lesson to pull out of it as well. So I think we do all 3 quite consistently.
Yeah, and not a lesson in the I don't wish to preach to people or sort of hold ourselves up as a bastion of sort of the way to live your life or things to do, but it's just like, actually look at how she achieved this. This is incredible. These are transferable skills. Here's something you can learn for how they've done this. And I mean, those 3 E's for me, they all play into each other. If it's an enlightening thing, it compels you to listen to it. If it's entertaining, it makes you want to hear more, and that makes the education part of it that much easier. Yeah, I think they're all sort of the three components that come together for what we're looking to achieve. And for me, it needs all of those. And I want it to be entertaining, and I want people to, Vicky and I were friends before we started the podcast, and even having done a podcast, we're still friends now.
Yes.
And I've just about, and I want that to come across. I want it to have that personality, and for people, hopefully they feel our excitement about the topics that we're covering. And I hope some of that enthusiasm and rubs off on them.
That's amazing. That is awesome. And that kind of leads to probably a very, very heavy reflective question. So brace yourselves. It's probably the most loaded question I have on my show. And I'll give a lot of background to this. So as I've mentioned before earlier in the interview, I've been doing this now in total 7 years. And within those 7 years, I've met a whole range of people, authors, historians, and I've learned so much from them. And while going down this road as an author and an historian, I've learned there's two paths, which I don't think a lot of people take into account or realize. And that is to be something and to be known as something. And in the case of history, to be an historian and to be known as a historian are two very different things. Being a historian is an individual dedicated to the art of history, preserving it, and not being solely motivated by money. But let's be honest, it's nice to get a little paycheck here and there. To be known as an historian, it's an individual dedicated to, showcasing their work, going into like papers, journals, shows like these, and really building their brand. Now, each path has its own set of hurdles and obstacles, but I definitely strongly believe that the second path is unfortunately the most enticing. The first timers, especially students in the field of history who want to make a career out of being a historian without considering the academic or the government side. And this, of course, leads to a very powerful thing, which is in this industry, there is no guarantee your first work is going to be the start of your legacy, whether that's, writing a book about history, starting a channel about history. There is no guarantee. It's a 50-50 chance, maybe not even a 50-50 chance. But with that said, there are a few exceptions. There are those whose first episodes or first publications did skyrocket them to the status that they want. All the power to them. That is not an easy thing to do. But generally speaking, the average individual is not going to instantly get the gratification that they want. This is not a get-rich-quick money scheme. It's not that. And unfortunately, a lot of people have made this your sole source of income, which they've lost their passion for history, which is completely sad. So ultimately, Vicky and Simon, I pose this question to you. Do you agree that just because in this industry, in the field of history, whatever you want to do, write a book, create a channel, and that even if it doesn't give you everything you want initially, it shouldn't stop somebody from honing one's craft and really understanding what they want to do with their passion?
No, I don't think it should.
Next question.
Next question.
No. I certainly, for me, my passion in this and the heroes, and this is not an endeavor for me to become more broadly known. I'm happy to only be known by those who already know me as Simon, and they can know I do a podcast as well. The people that we really want to be more widely known about, the people that we're trying to promote, are the subjects of our podcast. That's why we're here, and I can't really speak on the academic side of history. I know people need to make a living out of it, but it's we are making a podcast on the basis, on the foundations of what these people have done, what they've achieved, and just credit should go to them. And that's who we're really looking to highlight. It's it's a passion project in that I am passionate about them. I love learning about them. I cannot take any credit for their achievements. I just want more people to know it, and I maybe would like to be known as the guy who told me the cool story down the pub. And whatever comes out from that is satisfying for me.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just, I think it's very dangerous just in many aspects of life if you go into it wanting to get a particular thing out, which isn't actually the thrust of what you're doing. What we want to do is bring the story of these women to a wider audience, to make people aware of them.
And it brings us a lot of joy as well. And I think that's
Yeah.
something we don't want to lose. So we're very, very protective over that.
It would be lovely if we managed to earn something out of this, if it gave us an income. But for me, that should always be secondary to the core idea is that this is what we love to do. This is what we love to learn about. And that should always be the focus. And hopefully that sort of authenticity and that joy that it brings us is what will entice people in to listen to it. And then we can make $1 million.
That will be the dream. I think everyone, if I honestly could do that, I would absolutely, quit my job and just, teach history, write about history, and, live all that. But that is the dream. That is the end goal that we all strive to. That's not to say that it's impossible or unobtainable. It is. It just takes a lot of hard work and dedication and a lot of grinding. And and on that journey, we also meet a wide range of people who help us along the way and provide us new tips and tricks. And this is what I like to ask all of my guests is, the question of networking and building this community. So, Vicky, Simon, are there any personal shout you want to give to people who have helped you guys individually, as well as helped the podcast grow, whether that, episode ideas, structuring episodes, or maybe they've given you a shout out on their social, anything like that?
Lots of thoughts. First of all, Cara's amazing. She's been our absolute rock since day dot, and she's relentlessly positive, and I think that's so wonderful, and we're very lucky to have her in our lives. But I must say, like, the Instagram community of historians is so welcoming, and for an account that's just popped up like in the last few months, we've managed to feel really at home there, which I never expected. That I always kind of saw us on the sidelines, like fangirling everyone, and actually, they've really kind of encompassed in the engagement's always strong. People engage on stories and things like that. There's an account called Ollie. I can't remember the handle, but he's brilliant. And there's lots of women in there as well, which is fantastic. And, they're 2, 3, 4 years ahead, and it's amazing to see them doing really professional stuff. And it's just a fabulous, if you're interested, there's so many accounts there that can make you feel like you're part of that tribe.
Awesome. That is incredible. Simon, do any people in your inner circle you want to give a personal shout out to who have helped the podcast?
Well, mine mainly goes to Vicky.
That's true. Simon doesn't do our socials. So.
No, Vicky is the engine behind this. I think she's done an incredible job, and she just amazes me with all the effort and all the work that she puts into it, in making these networks happen, making these accounts happen. It's all her. Anything that you see that looks good, Vicky's done it. Anything that you don't see is because I've forgotten to do it.
Oh man, I absolutely love it. And as we near the final question, which I am so sad we had to reach it, because I could talk with you guys for hours and hours on end, but sadly we have come to the very end, and here is the final question. With everything you guys have learned thus far as independent creators, as storytellers, and fellow historians, what is your word of wisdom to other history enthusiasts, history buffs who want to take their passion for history, no matter what discipline that is, and build something off of it?
Mine would be just don't be embarrassed. I was embarrassed for a really long time, and really, this is the whole point of the podcast. When we were in school, we were only taught certain bits of history. We were taught in the British school system. You hear about Henry VIII a lot. You hear about World War II a lot, and they're all told from a male perspective. If you're interested in something that isn't that, that's okay. And if there's a bit of history that you love and that you want to do, that's okay. Don't be embarrassed about that. Because I felt like I felt so cut out of the history circle at school. And I was interested, but I wasn't allowed to talk about anything other than what they were talking about. And now I can, and it's great.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Simon, do you have any thoughts you want to add to that?
Just echoing that, be open, don't be ashamed, share it, just do something. You don't get stifled or caught up on making it an enormous project.
Yeah, don't overthink it.
If you've got something that you're passionate about, just share a tidbit with people, share as much as you can, but just make that little start. And it grows. I mean, I look back to the first time in Vicky's dining room when we were trying to figure out how the microphone worked. And somehow now we're 23, 24 episodes in, and it builds up. We didn't have a plan for anything beyond the first 2 episodes when we started, but you just chip away and gradually that will grow. But the most important thing is do something, however small. Just get started and be proud of what you're doing and proud of what you're interested in, because the world is big enough that there are other people who will be interested as well.
Awesome. Beautifully said. And with that, viewers and listeners, we conclude the first ever Dual Historians interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I want to give a huge thank you to our guests Simon and Vicky of She Changed History for making their official debut here on the channel. Guys, thank you so very, very much.
Thanks, Gabriel.
You're welcome. And before we officially end, where can people find you guys on social media? And do you want to take this moment to announce any upcoming episodes we should be looking out for in the coming days and weeks?
Sure. So we're on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. They're like our big 3. If you just type in She Changed History, it tends to be all one word. You can always email us at shechangedhistory@gmail.com. If you have a woman or somebody that you think we could do an episode on, please let us know. We've got a huge list, but we keep adding. And what was the final thing? Oh, upcoming episodes.
Yes.
We had one released on Tuesday, which was a doctor who went under the radar for a long time. People didn't know that they were assigned female at birth, and then just became a surgeon. It's quite exciting. And then this coming week, we've got... I've just been researching an episode today, and that's all I can think about. The episode I've researched today is about a painter who they actually had their signature scrubbed off the painting. So they'd done all this amazing work throughout their whole life, and then it was being sold for thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds, and they didn't get any credit. So that's what I've been. So that's a good one. That's a good one to listen to. That will be coming in the next couple of weeks. So.
Awesome. I'll link all that down below, viewers and listeners, in the description below. Make sure to go and check them out. And hopefully this won't be the last time I see Vicky or Simon on the show. Perhaps I will have them make their debut in the Historians Lounge series later this year for season 3, or potentially be the starting lineup of season 4. Just make sure to follow the social She Changed History on Instagram, as well as the other platforms down below. And as always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned for the last episode coming up this week. I'm very, very excited with that. And as always, viewers and listeners, this is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out, wishing you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world.